So the first step in this 3-step program for doing better in your exams is understanding. Now, understanding is really the fundamental reason why you're even in the education system, i.e. the reason you go to school, college, university is to improve and increase your understanding of different subjects and topics. And actually understanding the stuff you're being taught, the stuff you're learning, is really important as a first step to doing well in that subject. And something that's important to note is that the further you continue on your academic career, the more important this understanding section becomes. Throughout GCSEs, you can kind of get away with not understanding anything, but just memorising. At A-levels, it gets a bit more difficult. It's much easier if you understand, but again, you can kind of get away with just memorising everything. But once you get to university, you're going to really struggle if you don't really focus on understanding the stuff you're being taught. And although, like I said, you can get away with just memorising stuff, at least at the start of your education, it's best to get into that good practice of trying to understand everything, as that way you'll be better suited as you continue and progress on your academic career. A good test to see if you've truly understood something you've learned is the Feynman technique. And essentially, all the Feynman technique asks is, can you explain it to a 5-year-old? Or another way to phrase this is, can you explain it to your parents, or a family member, or friends that don't necessarily do the subject you're studying? And the reason why this is a good test is a lot of the time when we think we've understood something, all we've done is memorise an explanation. And to further justify why this understanding section is so important is that it helps with the next section, which is memorisation. So every single person has this thing which is called the forgetting curve. We'll revisit this term in more detail later in the video. Essentially, it's a curve that shows how much you remember something after the first point when you were taught it. Now, if we were to compare two different forgetting curves, for someone that understands the thing they've been taught and someone who doesn't actually understand it but were just taught it, you can see that the person who understands it retains a lot more of that information at a given time compared to the person who doesn't actually understand it in the first place. And this kind of makes sense, right? But to further back this up, let's look at something which I'm currently revising at the moment. Now, this is something in microeconomics that we call a best response function. Now, I'm not going to explain it at all. You're just going to look at this and now try and memorise it. Now, that's pretty hard, right? It looked quite complex and difficult, and it's quite hard to keep that in your brain when you're just solely memorising it with no understanding. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you what this actually is and what it means. Now, the best response function gives you an action which is in our action set. Essentially, what that bit means is that we have a set of actions we can pick from. Think about, I don't know, in rock, paper, scissors you have 3 actions: rock, paper and scissors. Now we're saying the action, so for example the specific action of rock, is the action which we pick from our action set. So that's what we mean when there's little AI exists within big AI. Now this colon means such that. So the action from our action set is such that the utility we get from playing that action, given that the other player has played some action, is weakly greater or is greater than or equal to the utility we get from playing any other action in our action set, given the other player has played the same action. Now again, that's still a bit of a mouthful, but I think an example will help you understand this better. Let's take the case of rock, paper, scissors. And now, the best response function tells us what's the best response for the other player playing a specific action. Okay, so let's say the other player plays paper. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with the game of rock, paper, scissors, but if you're not, when they play paper, rock would lose for us, paper would draw, and scissors would win. And we can denote the different utilities we'd get from playing these different actions with playing rock is -1 because we lose, playing paper is 0 because we draw, and playing scissors is 1 because we win. So now looking at what this best response function says, it says that the best response is the action which is available in our action set. Our action set here is playing rock, paper or scissors, such that the utility we get from playing that specific action is weakly greater than the utility we get from playing any other action in our action set. So in this case, our best response would be to play scissors, right? Because by playing scissors, the utility we get is 1, which is greater than the utility we get from playing any other action, i.e. the utility of 1 is greater than the utility of 0 of playing paper, or the utility of -1 of playing rock. And therefore, this best response function would tell us that playing scissors in the case of the other player playing paper is the best response. Now hopefully with that explanation, and this might be a pretty poor example because we're looking at some quite complex stuff which may depend on you having some sort of base knowledge in economics or maths, but essentially, hopefully now you better understand what that thing is, and therefore you'll be better able to memorise it. So that's the first step of doing better in your exams, actually understanding the stuff you're being taught and the stuff you'll be tested on in the exams. The second step is memorisation. So once you've understood the things, you actually need to remember them. And this is where different memorisation techniques and practices come into play. Now, like I said, understanding already puts you at a bit of a head start. You naturally have an improved forgetting curve, and thus you're just more likely to remember stuff in the first place. Even when we understand things can still fall out of memory, and that's why we need the memorization techniques I'm going to talk about now. Well, there's two key aspects of memorization which all your techniques and practices should entail. And those two things, which I'm sure you've heard of before, are active recall and spaced repetition. Active recall is just a fancy way of saying testing yourself, i.e. picking pieces of information out from within your brain. And then spaced repetition refers to repeating this active recall practice at increasing intervals over time. And the reason why you need spaced repetition is because of this forgetting curve I talked about earlier. Essentially, you have the forgetting curve. And what this means is your knowledge of a certain thing you've been taught decays over time. To actually keep what you want to remember in your brain, you need to keep revisiting it at spaced intervals. And because every time you go over a topic again, the forgetting curve becomes flatter and flatter, you can begin to increase the intervals by which you revisit a specific topic. And there are two key components to this spaced repetition practice within your revision. And that is ensuring you have spaced repetition for whole topics and also spaced repetition within specific topics. So to give some examples of active recall techniques, we have flashcards, Cornell notes, past exam questions, etc. Basically, anything that requires you to really think about something and pick information out your brain to answer the question is an example of active recall. To give some examples of spaced repetition techniques, we have some which are built into specific apps. We have the red, amber, green system, we have a retrospective revision timetable system, and we have a prospective revision timetable system. Apps such as Anki, Quizlet, Brainscape, etc. have built-in spaced repetition functions, which essentially means you rate specific questions on how well you know them, and based on your rating of that specific question, it will come up more or less according to how you rated it. I.e., if you find it really difficult, it will come up more, and if you find it really easy, it will come up less. And incorporating spaced repetition by using the algorithms which are built into these apps works for both topics and also within a topic. And then the next system which helps you use spaced repetition is the red, amber, green system. Now this system refers to physical flashcards. And essentially it's just your own algorithm for making sure you focus on the weaknesses. So once you do a physical flashcard, what you can do is put it into a pile of red, amber or green. Green being you knew it very well, red being you didn't really know it at all. And then when you finished all the flashcards, you go back and you do the red pile again, and again you put them in a red, amber or green. And you keep doing the reds until there's no reds left, and then you move on to the ambers, and then you keep doing the ambers until there's no ambers left, and once you've finished, everything will be in the green. Now this is a good system, but this only works for within a topic and not for topics as a whole. I.e., if you only relied on the red, amber, green system, yes, you would be incorporating spaced repetition for a particular set of flashcards, but you wouldn't have a system for knowing which flashcards you should do on a specific day. Now, physical flashcards do work fine, but nowadays I think online flashcards are just much more useful and much more convenient. Now, the next system is a prospective revision timetable. Now, essentially what this is when you come out to studying at the beginning of the exam season, what you can do is study a particular subject or study a particular topic. What you then do is have some sort of diary or calendar and write that topic in for now, a few days, a week, and a month. And then in the future, when you come out to revising, what you can do is open up your diary and see what topics you have to do for that day. Now this makes sure you're using spaced repetition, and it also means you can increase the gaps between the stuff you're doing. And then the final system would be a retrospective revision timetable. Now this is similar to the prospective revision timetable, but it's not as prescriptive. I.e., when you do a subject, you can colour code how you felt on that subject. And then on a particular day when you come out to revising, what you can do is look at your spreadsheet and pick what you want to revise based on what your week is at that point in time. Essentially, all these techniques I've talked about work really well. It's just about finding the one that works for you. What I personally do is use flashcard apps which have the systems built into them. So the first step was understanding the stuff we're being taught. The second step was remembering it. And the third step is practicing it. So what I mean by this is doing past exam papers. Now, the more like actual exam conditions these past papers are, the better. What I mean by actual exam conditions is no phone, no internet, time conditions, quiet, no distractions, etc. And the reason why practice is really essential and you can't just get away with just memorizing is because practice puts you in a position to see what the actual exams will be like. And there is a skill of learning exam technique and learning what the examiners and what the markers are really looking for. And once you've done the exam paper, mark it accurately. And by marking it, you can see where your weaknesses and where your shortcomings are. E.g., there may be a particular topic which you're getting a lot of questions wrong on. Or there may be a particular type of question. For example, a 6 marker, which you're not doing very well on. And then what you can do is put measures in place to make yourself do better next time. So these measures could be focusing on a particular topic more in your flashcards to make sure you really understand that topic and thus you don't lose as many marks next time you do the exam. Another measure could be focusing on specific types of questions to really build your technique and exam practice in that specific type of question. A way to do this is to use exam questions by topic, which is a feature that a lot of exam websites have. For example, physics and maths tutor have exam questions by topic, which means you can really focus on the topics you're weakest at. And now hopefully you've understood everything, you've memorised it, you've practiced it so you can see where your weaknesses are, you can then go back to the understanding, memorisation, practice, and this will put you in the best position to really do well in your exams. Now hopefully you found this video really useful and informative. If you did like it, I think you'll like this video, which is where I talk about how to do well in the school game and how to really beat the system. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or queries, please leave a comment down below, and I'll see you soon.